Hey everybody, Scott Crawley here, aka the poor man's Jason Momoa. I am back again with another Industry Pro tutorial. Now let me explain to you what we're about to dig into here. My sister-in-law is a photographer. She sent me a couple of photos here. One is of the Chicago Theater and the other is of these caves in Sedona, I believe. She really likes the composition of this, but she wanted to know if it's possible to get rid of this Chase logo. And I told her absolutely. She also wants to take a look at getting rid of this person down here in the bottom of this photo. So what we're going to do now is use the clone stamp in Photoshop to get rid of both of these blemishes naturally. Here we go. We've got our photos loaded up here. I wanted to show you something. If we take a look at our layers panel, I have the layers inside of bins or folders. Right now we have the touch-up version that's on top. I have created an original version just by duplicating it because it's nice to be able to toggle the eyeball on and off to see the difference of what it originally looked like compared to what we're touching up. I also did this for the Red Rock Caves, and as you can see I have the original layer here, and then I also have a touch-up layer should be up here. If we turn this off right now, we don't see any changes up here because I haven't affected anything yet. So I'm going to make sure that I am clicked on this touch-up layer up here, and I'm going to come over to my clone stamp tool, which is right here. And for some reason we've got the Ghostbusters symbol on the screen. That is telling us that we cannot use this tool with the current state of this layer. It is a smart object, and if you don't know what that is, you can identify it down here on the bottom right of the thumbnail of each layer. That just means that it's not going to let you destructively edit this layer. But if we right click in the gray area over here, you can always go and choose Rasterize Layer. And when we do that, we see that the Smart Object logo has disappeared, but you can still see it down here on the original. And that's fine. If we toggle the eyeball on and off, you don't really see anything changing up here yet. Alright, so I'm going to make sure that the eyeball is toggled on. We want to make sure that we are on the layer that we are going to touch up. Now let's take a look at how we can use our clone stamp tool to get rid of the Chase logo. So what I'm going to do is zoom in here and take a look. This one might be a little bit difficult because of the straight geometric lines that are behind the Chase logo on this sign. That's not going to be a real big problem for me though, as long as you know how to use the clone stamp properly. So let's take a look. Once we have the clone stamp loaded, I'm going to look at my settings up here. And I think it's smart to go ahead and turn the hardness down. We don't want a very defined round circle edge around what we paint. And the size is going to change depending on what the background is that we need to clone stamp. I'll show you an example now. If you use your left and right bracket keys, it will increase and decrease the size of your clone stamp. Well, right now, when I click something to use the clone stamp, it says could not use the clone stamp because the area to clone has not been defined. Option click to define a source point. So what that is telling you is you need to tell it what you would like to clone. And so if I want to start cloning on this point and then painting that way to the right, I want to find another point that has a similar color to it. So let's say we want to use this point. Maybe we can come up to this here. I'm going to hold Option and I'm going to use that as my crosshairs. I hit click and that samples that. Now I'm not clicking and dragging or anything like that. I'm just moving my mouse around and you see that it has borrowed the pixels that lived inside that circle, and wherever I click, it will essentially copy and paste that area. Now I'm going to go ahead and click and drag over to the right, and I can go up a little bit, and I'll undo one more time just to show you. I'm going to come up here and grab this area by holding Option and then I click, and so that has cloned that area. Now you see that there's this weird line in here. We're going to go ahead and get rid of that, and if I hover over the edge of this corner and I click and drag, notice the crosshairs above where I originally cloned, it is moving along with wherever I'm clicking and dragging. You want to keep your eye on that to make sure that it's not going to go over an area that you don't want to clone. For example, if I come up here, you see that I'm starting to paint the top portion of this marquee because the crosshairs that are above it, where I originally cloned, it is tethered to it in the exact distance where you started clone stamping. So let's try that one more time. I'm going to Option click here. And I always just keep it in my peripheral. I always keep the original clone crosshairs in my peripheral just to make sure that it doesn't go into an area that I don't want cloned. Now I got to be careful now that I'm moving down. If I'm still clicking and dragging, once I get to a place where the original Chase logo existed, and I'll even show you, if I come down further, you see that I'm starting to clone stamp the Chase logo down here because I have yet to pick up my mouse and start a new clone. So I'm going to undo that again one more time just to show you. I clone by holding Option. And you don't see the crosshairs yet because you haven't set an exact distance where you want that to start cloning. I'm going to start painting here, and I'm clicking and dragging. Now again, I want to be careful with how far down I go, because if I lift up my mouse, let's try that. I'm going to lift up the mouse and I start painting again. You see that the crosshairs are still tethered to that exact distance of where I originally cloned. So if we go over this, and I got to be careful not to come down too far or else it'll start cloning the Chase logo down here at the bottom, but that did a pretty decent job. Some people might say, oh, I can see that that is the exact same color gray as that. Well, you can always come and borrow it from another section. So let's say I want to clone this area. Option click that. I click and I can come down here, and wherever I start clicking and dragging and painting, it will now be tethered to that area. So if you want to just make it look a little bit different so it doesn't look like you've obviously clone stamped it, then go ahead and sample from over here perhaps. Let's see if we sample from here. Now this color of row looks to be a little bit darker, so you wouldn't want to paint in here or else it'll change the color. Like for example, I'll show you. If I clone here and I come and I start painting, you see it's a darker gray, a little bit darker gray that it's painting because it is borrowing from the darker row. It's not terrible. If we zoom out and take a look, I don't think anybody would be the wiser because there is a lot of mismatched color in this marquee sign. Let's take a look at the original. As you can see, I have my original down here, and I'm going to toggle the eyeball on and off with the touch-up. And as you can see, looks pretty darn good. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and hide the We Love Chicago folder. I'm going to go ahead and tuck that up, and now we are going to focus on the touch-up of the Red Rock Caves here. She wanted me to get rid of this person down here in blue. This one will probably be much easier because there's no geometric straight lines in the background that we need to really adhere to. We are on our clone stamp, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom in down here by holding Option and scrolling. So this layer is not a smart object, and you can tell because by looking at the bottom right hand corner of this thumbnail. If it were though, right click, let's go ahead and just make it a smart object really quickly by convert to smart object. The good thing about a smart object is it preserves the quality of the resolution if you scale it down and scale it back up. The bad thing is you can't destructively edit it. In this case, we want to make sure that it is a rasterized layer. So I would right click and choose Rasterize Layer, and as you can see, the icon has disappeared down here. I don't see the icon down here. I click on this, I right click, convert to smart object, and that's just a good way to preserve that layer to make sure that it doesn't ever lose quality if you accidentally scaled it down in size. Okay, so now I'm going to click on my touch-up layer. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. If you remember, I said if left and right brackets, increase size and decrease your size of your brush. And if you're wondering why we're seeing green back here, it's because I still have the active clone from the other We Love Chicago image. So I'm going to go ahead and re-clone. I want to find an area that looks like a similar color. Maybe we'll start here, and I'm going to work my way to the right. So I'm going to hold Option to clone. I click. And now you see that whatever is going to paint is the actual brown color. Whenever I start, that's when you see the tethered crosshairs. And as you can see, I'm moving, clicking and dragging too far, and the original clone tethered crosshairs is now covering the area that that person in their blue jacket originally existed. So we don't want to do it that way. Undo, and let's start here, and I want to show you some shorter clones. Here we go. Option click. And I'm just going to go up and down right around here. I'm going to let go, and I'm going to re-clone down here. So I hold Option, I'm going to clone there, and I'm going to come right over here and work my way up. You can see that wherever the crosshair is tethered, it will stay with it the entire time. You always want to keep your eye on that over there. And now I can see that this little chunk of pixels looks very similar to this chunk of pixels. So if you want to break that up a little bit, I'm just going to randomly clone down here. It looks pretty uniform. So hold Option and click, and I just click, click. and it kind of broke that part up a little bit so it didn't look like it was obviously cloned. So now here we go. I see like a little lighter area, a little stripe right here. Maybe I want to continue that down to this section. So I'm going to clone right here, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to paint to the left and to the right to make that look pretty natural. Now we've got a little bit of this fall off here, which I think should be intentional because I assumed that that's how it was. You can always extend this over if you want to, and let's see if we can do that. So I'm going to clone here, and I'm going to click here and slowly paint over to the right. I don't know if I like that, so maybe I'll undo. There we go. All right, and then you can always clean this area up by cloning right here. And then maybe if you want to make it more smooth edged instead of feathered edged right here, because our brush is feathered, let's go ahead and come up and choose hardness and bring that up to wherever. You could always take it all the way up to 100 if you want, but that will create a very solid circle wherever you paint your brush. So maybe I'll find a nice happy medium. I'll put it at 80% and we'll see how it looks. All right, so grab this area, and I'm just going to come down here and lightly clone over the edge of this right here to kind of flatten that out. That looks like it worked pretty well, so I undid it just to show you. I clicked Command Z to undo. Let's try this one more time. Slowly paint that. If you could smooth it out a little bit if you want to make it look like that. Let's go ahead and toggle the touch up off with the eyeball so we can see the original underneath, and boom, that's a pretty decent job. Okay, so there you have it. In a very short amount of time, we were able to use Clone Stamp to remove either blemishes or objects that you don't want in your image. Thanks for watching this tutorial. We're going to be posting a lot more coming up in the near future. Let us know in the comments what you would like to see, what you would like to learn, and we'd love to help you out with that. Thanks again. This is Scott Crawley signing off for Sharp Focus Creative Academy.